Alright. Part 2. Evola, Electric Boogaloo. Point 7. If the ideal of a virile and organic state of unity is to exist, one must not be carried off in the direction of totalitarianism. Okay? Now, a hierarchy does not equal hierarchism. Last video I did the vocab word for hierarchism, but it wasn't in the video anyway, so we're going to do it now one more time. Hierarchism is artificial, rigid, or materialistic form of imposed hierarchy by force. So a government enforcing a hierarchy and not one that's organically produced through a culture. Okay? By organic, Evola means a state that is spiritual in essence, with a central orientating influence or an impulse that, depending on who's leading, assumes very different forms of expression. So it has a central orientating influence that could be a king, that could be a religion. So, a monarchy or a theocracy, either of those. By unified, Evola means a state that doesn't cause dissociation, excessive individualism, or social atomization, which we see a lot in America, or absolutization of the particular, giving absolute power to higher classes, personal interests, or bureaucracies, which we also see a lot in America. It's almost like he knew what was coming. Crazy stuff. The sun's starting to come out a little bit. Beautiful. Thank God. It's Minnesota in mid-November, so the fact that there's not snow all over the ground and there's even some kind of sunshine, the fact that I can even be out here right now, November 17th, is insane. Evola points out that the West needs a new center/supreme point of reference, as he thinks Christianity/the cross was dead. It needs to be a new symbol of sovereignty/authority. So obviously, like he said in point 1, that's what the fascist movements tried to do with the rising sun, the swastika, and the eagle. I obviously disagree. I think there should be a Catholic resurgence. I agree with Guinan. If the West is going to go back to spirituality, it's probably going to be Catholicism. We're going to try. We're going to see what happens. The spiritual fluid that must animate every relationship of fidelity, dedication, service, disindividualized action, so that the gray, the mechanistic, and the oblique of the current political social world is truly surpassed. So, obviously what he's saying is we must re-sacralize the world. We must make our consciousness dedicated to the service of the divine and no longer in service to consumeristic capitalism. And Evola is a monarchist who thinks it's absurd to be anti-democratic and a modern republican. Modern republicanism is an ideology that belongs to the modern world and is best to be let go. Okay? He thinks republicanism cannot work. America was founded in modernity, so the ideas of America come from modernity and Protestantism. So in the creation of an anti-modern America, I don't know yet. I mean, part of this channel is figuring out what that is, right? How can you create an America that's not based around modernity when the principles of it were founded on modern principles and Enlightenment thinking? We'll find out. Let's find out. Okay. What is needed now is a cultivation of an environment that will raise us up to prepare for a new symbol and system full of meaning and authority. And I think Evola is actually, as much as he kind of critiques Heidegger, is taking a note out of Heidegger's book. Actually, I don't know what came first. Scratch that. I don't know what came first, because there's that interview he does at the end of his life, Heidegger, where he says, what we need now is a new God. The West will die unless a God reveals itself to us. And this meaning and authority could never come from a president who is elected every 4 years, can be revoked at any time, has no spiritual blessing, and is elected by irrational forces of the masses. So since he's a monarchist, he thinks a God king would have to be elected to save whatever culture or society he is talking about. I think this is why you see so much of that imagery with Trump. Steve Bannon is obviously an Evolian. So I think a lot of that comes from the Bannon type of thinking, to be completely honest with you. It's Carlyle, here's a quote he said from Carlyle, which Evola put in the essay, which says, "The valet world has to be governed by the sham hero." That almost seems like a dig at Trump. Trump is the sham hero, which is governing the valet consumeristic world. That's funny. All right, point 8. The 8th point is in regards to nationalism, the homeland. People would like to adopt a sentimental and materialistic conception of the nation. Nations foreign to the highest European political traditions and irreconcilable with the idea of the organic state. So the European tradition is obviously monarchy. And what Evola is saying is, in our soul and our collective consciousness, these modern day concepts of the nations are extremely foreign to our tradition and to our spirits. And Evola obviously wants to bring back these God King monarchs that actually care about its people, actually want the best for its race, its people, its culture. Not saying, obviously, I'm not saying that. I'm just going off this. And what Evola is saying is, he's obviously not saying weren't bad monarchs, weren't bad, leaders of these feudal systems. And I don't think anywhere he has said that. 2 more problems for nationalism. Even far-left communists exploit the idea of a homeland for their agenda, making it a hollow rhetorical tool. Even Kamala Harris could say she loves America. She obviously doesn't. Her and her husband do not, love America. They just use that as a tool for, these people, all they do is talk shit about America and white people and heritage Americans. Obviously, they don't care about us. They just want their communist state. Europeans need to focus on, look at that sun, supranational groups instead of narrowing our focus on one country. So we need alliances between USA, Canada, Australia, EU, New Zealand, and South Africa, and we need to build alliances between the people in these countries that want the same things we want. Okay, that is going to be better than just trying to change one system. Principles are more essential, obviously. But the question of principle is more essential. See, that even. The notion of nation, homeland, and people fall under the umbrella of higher elevated ideology. Un momento. Un moment. S'il vous plaît. Okay. In this higher idea of, in this higher plane of ideas, the idea and in this higher plane, the idea divides. The idea is carried by a resolute elite and concretized by the state. So what he is saying is the ideas of the elite are what the state should put into motion in the political system, okay? The spiritual elite, remember when we're talking about Guinan and Evola, when they say elites, they're saying spiritual elite. They're not saying intellectual elites even. I mean, maybe Evola is a little bit, but they're saying really the spiritual people who intellectualize their spirituality and what's best for their people. So Evola thinks, I just want to clarify, so he's not talking about scientific intellectualism. So Evola thinks the parts of fascism that stays faithful to the best of European political traditions gave primacy to the idea and state. It understood that nations and people acquire meaning, a form, and participate in the higher degree of existence only within the state. Okay? So, what he's saying is the state shouldn't come first, and the state shouldn't control the spiritual and intellectual elites and then make policies for the people. The elite should work with the state to make these. It should be elite state, then people. And people will only acquire meaning and form within the state and within these ideas and principles and policies that we have set forth. So, like we've said earlier, people can attain a higher degree of existence within a shitty system. But if you really loved your people, you really wanted the best for your race, you would make policies that would form people in these transcendent modes of being already. Okay? You shouldn't make a system that teaches 8-year-olds to cut their dicks off and be stuffed with hormones and then expect them to go through spiritual transcendence. It would be a lot easier to not do that, right? Not go through the whole dick chopping off thing first. That would probably be for the best. So, what he thinks is what matters now is not the same language or homeland, but being of the same idea. This is the modern point of departure. We must arrive at a new national solidarity, but without compromises to reach it. Evola thinks there is no other way. We must plant our flag and say these are the values of these far-right European groups in all these countries. These are the values. We're not compromising. We're sticking with them until we are the flag in the ground, saying this is it. We're sticking with them until things get so bad in the modern world everyone realizes we're right and comes to our side. Even if the countries around us fall, the people, the ideas, the groups will still be on their feet. Even if we want to support our idea, also on national traditions, one must be careful. Because in some countries there are entire homeland histories of Masonic and anti-traditional inspiration, specializing in attributing national character to the most problematic aspects of their history. He's saying there's Masonic, communists, Israeli forces within our academics, within our histories, within our presses, within our book publishers that are publishing fake histories that try to make us build an identity based around false characteristics of our ancestors. Our soul will always be able to tell the difference and point us towards the right way, though. Point 9. This is my favorite point. This is in regards to culture. What we call worldview is not based on books. It is an inner form that can be more precise in one person without a particular culture than is an intellectual or a writer. Okay? So these inner forms, what he's trying to say is, like, if you go talk to an American farmer, and I don't mean this in a mean way, but let's just say you go talk to an 80 IQ American farmer in the Appalachian Mountains, that guy is going to be more in tune and more able to voice his worldview, an American heritage worldview, than any intellectual or writer is going to be able to do. If you just go talk to this 80 IQ Appalachian farmer, he's going to be able to tell you and show you what an American is more than any secular 150 IQ fucking Harvard sociologist, okay? Fuck those people. The individual is left open to influences of every type of bad ones found in a free culture. This is the problem with a free culture. If and we see this in America, obviously. If you're able to have a truly free culture, then obviously you can push all these bad things, pornography, drugs, hookup culture, all these degenerate things, satanic music, horrible fucking movies in these culture, and you could say, well, it's a free country, which is true. And I mean, that is the way these subversive groups do what they do in America, and there's no way, I mean, there is obviously a way around that, but in the current way, in the current system, there's no way around that. There are specific currents from which the youth of today must defend themselves interiorly, okay? Young men, this is important. Right knowing and young men must take account of the intoxication working on the totality of a generation from concordant varieties of a distorted and false vision of life which has affected men's inner strength, the pushing of hippie degenerate drug culture, the pushing of gang-banging degenerate culture, the pushing of false spiritual paths, the pushing of Hollywood garbage culture. These things are a concerted effort to weaken us. You must realize that. Reject all of it. The four main ones being historical materialism, Darwinism, psychoanalysis, and existentialism. And I would add popular culture like I was just talking about. But intellectually, the historical materialism, aka Marxism, Darwinism, psychoanalysis, and existentialism. The fundamental dignity of modern man must be asserted against Darwinism. Man's true place is not that of a more or less evolved animal through natural selection. Even if no one spoke of Darwin, the modern man is addicted to this biological, debased, materialistic idea. Okay, the secular materialism, this idea that we are nothing more than evolved monkey that came from a lightning bolt hitting a bacteria on a rock, okay? Which, you know, when you think about it, it just seems more, I don't know, more ridiculous than the idea of some sort of, I don't know, creation. So next, psychoanalysis. The idea of the self must be validated. A self who remains conscious, autonomous, and sovereign in the confrontation with the dark and subterranean part of his soul and the demon of sensuality. Okay, he's saying we have free will, we are autonomous people. Okay, we are not just collectives that, a conscious that is collected of external stimuli and inner subconscious that's also pushing things up into our consciousness. We are more than just the collection of subconscious thoughts rising and external thoughts coming in. We have free will. We are autonomous. This does not mean repression or a psychotic scission, but he brings about an equilibrium of all his faculties ordered to a higher meaning of living and acting. So he's not saying just repress everything. He's just saying that take all of this into our accounts and push forward. And he points out that a psychoanalysis disempowerment of the conscious principle, prominence given to the subconscious, the irrational, and the collective unconscious converges with modern society's urgencies. The impulse from below, subversion, revolutionary substitution of the interior to the superior, and the disdain of every principle of authority. So he's saying that psychoanalysis and modern society work together because these things they want you to think you're nothing more than irrational, subconscious, and collective unconscious thoughts, okay? They want you to think that. They want you in a society of urgency and constant consumerism, want you to think of yourself as nothing more than an animal that wants to consume and wants to just keep consuming. This works together. This works in Thus, modern man is attacked on two different levels with the same ideas, individual and societal. And last, existentialism. Even to distinguish in it what is proper, confused, philosophy, was restricted to a circle of specialists. It used to be just an elite circle of academics that would speak of existentialism, but today it seems to be almost the given for society. People seem to be postmodernist or existentialist in some sense in their way of thinking, even if you don't know what those terms mean. A lot of people, if they're not devout religious people, are some form of that. Or they are just modern scientific type thinkers. we must recognize the state of the soul in crisis that became a system and was adulated. So only a soul in crisis, like I would say, Heidegger, Nietzsche would think of a system like existentialism. And in short, Evola finds it wrong how Heidegger, Sartre, and Camus were so negative and stick on a horizontal plane of contingency. So the way all of their values are equal, okay, they are not a vertical hierarchy of values, okay. For Camus, Heidegger, Nietzsche, everything is relative. They are these people who started this relativism in a true philosophical sense. When Nietzsche at his best already showed us a way to recover a meaning for existence, and give oneself a law/intangible value in the face of radical nihilism, a positive existentialism from a noble nature. So, sorry, I didn't mean to put Nietzsche in with Heidegger, Sartre, and Camus earlier. He is saying what the best of Nietzsche gave us, the non-materialistic side of him, gave us is a positive existentialism and a noble nature, a way to revalue all values hierarchically. But these concepts must be overcome not just intellectually but lived. We must return to thinking there is a hierarchy of values. Once detoxified, a man can pursue clarity, rectitude, and strength. So I do think Nietzsche gave us this way to revalue all values, but I know Evola thinks, and I also believe this, so I just want to point this out. I think in Ride the Tiger, Evola talks about the reason Nietzsche went insane is actually because he had no ground for his values. They weren't grounded in tradition. He was touching on something true and something written into the universe, but because he had no ground, that's why he went insane. And that's why Evola thinks you must, and Guanan thinks you must be part of a spiritual tradition in order to get this transcendent knowledge. Because if you do it through secularism, you will go insane, like Nietzsche is basically saying. Okay, 2 more points. This is point 10. The position that lies between culture and custom will finally be made clear. From communism came the anti-bourgeois rallying call. Although Evola points out there's 2 ways in which to surpass the bourgeois. 1, the Marxist materialistic collectivized humanity. Basically, social and proletarian values versus bourgeois and capitalistic decadence. Or 2, the way in which men rise beyond it through the aforementioned heroic and aristocratic conception of existence. They will be anti-bourgeois because they disdain the comfortable life, not following those who promise material advantages. They will demand everything of themselves, and they will not be preoccupied by security because they love the essential union of life and risk. So, if we want to get out of this system that we are currently in, we could take the communist, materialistic route or the spiritual heroic route. Okay? And we will reject the rhetoric and false idealism of past generations, crying about global warming and getting on private jets. Okay? All the ideas like multiculturalism and saving Africa. Okay, boomers, I'm sorry. Multiculturalism is a failure. Somalians won't stop stealing from Minneapolis $1 billion in like 6 years. Okay, we're not going to save Africa. Look at the Hart family from Minnesota. They want you to forget that story. Look up the 2 lesbians that adopted like 6 African kids, and then the 6 African kids, I'm laughing because of the white women, I'm sorry for the kids. But these 6 African kids drove these 2 SSRI, feminist-filled white women so insane that they drove the SUV filled with the kids off a cliff. These women were from Minnesota, my hometown. I'm from Minnesota right now. I've been here my whole life, but I'm planning on moving. They drove this car off a cliff. I'm sorry, white ladies, you're not going to save Africa. Okay? Sorry to break it to you. Sorry, boomers. All capital letter slogans, so progress, equality, democracy must be let go, and all gestures, used for its effects. So diversity is our strength, you know what I mean? The science is settled, all these stupid expressions, it's over, okay? We must reject all this rhetoric, these false idealisms of boomers. It's over. I'm sorry, liberals. Sorry, liberal boomers. These new heroic great men of the right, the far right, must fight the left, not by rejecting the left's false ideas, but also living the heroic life. We cannot just reject their ideas, we must put our thoughts, our ideologies into action. Even if it means our life is worth the great of our future generations. Through the internal and external purifying fires, one holds forces anterior and superior to the bourgeois world and economy. Okay, we must purify ourselves through the flame. It's that simple. With this, one creates the lines of defense and consolidates positions when, at the opportune moments, he will strike out with the action of reconstruction. So we must keep our inner strength. We must stay in a dark corner of the world, lit up by only our being, until the moment where we can strike shows itself. This is what it is to be a man amongst the ruins. Last point 11. What is the relationship with the dominant religion? A religious factor is necessary as the background for a true heroic conception of life. That must be essential for our political alignment, not an ethical state or a clerical state, aka the Vatican. Okay? He's trying to say that for a true culture to rise and be dominant, we must have religion, a spiritual path. We must feel in ourselves evidence of a higher life. It gives us unbreakable strength, absolute enthusiasm. Without it, it is almost impossible. That is why people without religion just get depressed and anxious and die of drug overdoses. Okay? Without it is almost impossible to defy death and take no account of one's life unless acting irrational. Okay? Also, there's no discipline justified with a higher meaning. It must be more than Catholic moralism, which only domesticates us. And it also must distrust humanitarianism, equality, principles of love, and forgiveness over honor, justice, which is a lot of Christianity. We must bring back a heroic Knights of Templar, crusade-like Catholicism, not just moralism. In order for it to be Catholicism, we must recover the spirit of the best medieval crusaders, almost like a new, close-knit Templar order, relentless against the current chaos, breakdown, subversions, and materialism of the modern world. At minimum, holding firm the positions of the syllabus of Europoli, Pope Pius IX, sorry if I pronounced any of that wrong, with no instance of doubt in our choice. Given the modern state of the Church, pure reference to the spirits will suffice as evidence of a transcendent reality, to appeal to another force, to graft onto ours, to have a reminder our battle is not only political, and to attract a sacred purpose on our new world of men and leader of men. Okay? So, Catholicism has a lot of work that needs to be done, and I'm not, like I've said before, I'm more of a philosophy, Sunnah philosophy. I joined Catholicism a few years ago and have been taking it seriously more, but I don't like to look at myself as a theological thinker. You must go to other sources for that. Sorry guys. I want to read some Augustine. I've never read Augustine or Aquinas, and I want to read some of that and do videos on that. So hopefully I will be able to do that, but I will be way less of a source of authority on that than the existentialists or the traditionalists and people of that matter. And yeah. So let's go through the 11 points, a summary of them. Point 1. We are at the end of the Kali Yuga cycle with modernity, and we must find good men to determine our path forward. 2. Fundamental issue is the internal renewal. We need to create new people through self-formation over political and economic systems. 3. This should be done through the legionary spirit of loyalty, honor, and heroism. It must be the new base of resistance. 4. We must reject economic classes and bourgeois proletariat values. 5. Liberalism is the beginning stage of communism, and Americanism is just a more subtle form of this collectivism and thought control. 6. Business reconstruction and ideological deproletarianism. Point 6. Business reconstruction must be taken place, and ideological deproletarianization must take place. Sorry about that. Like I said in the first video, I'm filming this is the same day as the first video. I worked 30 hours in 2 days, the last 2 days, so I'm a little tired today. Point 7. We must have an organic hierarchy over totalitarianism and secularism. Point 8. Nationalism / the fatherland must be subordinate to ideals and the elite. 9. Culture needs to support inner strength by rejecting Darwinism, existentialism, psychoanalysis, historical materialism, and I think pop culture. 10. We must despise comfort / materialism, and we must embrace risk, discipline, and silent accomplishments. Point 11. Transcendent spirituality must be over dogmatic religion, and it is essential for heroic commitment. And we must try to align this with militant Catholicism. God will it. Alright, I'm going to end this video like every video. Young men, stay sober, follow God, and always sign a prenup. God bless.